You're listening to Releasing Trauma, a survivor's podcast. And now here's your host, Tracy Osborne. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Today, we're going to be talking about lessons on self-mastery, going from music to life. And my guest today is Werner. He is a internationally renowned American jazz pianist and a Grammy nominee. And we're going to be talking a little bit about his book and his story and how he was able to overcome some of the traumas in his life. So, Kenny, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tracy.
Well, I'm excited to have you here. Let's start with your traumas and the fact that, you had to deal with losing your daughter and surviving a car accident and some of that. So, tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, it's funny because obviously the definition of trauma has really widened over the years. Now there's trauma with a large T and trauma with a small T. Mm-hmm. I think growing up as a little kid, my first trauma was trauma with a small T, that of being the early 1950s and after World War II, and with the emergence of television, a few factors had me quietly traumatized, sitting in front of the television a lot because it seemed to solve a problem for parents, and having brothers that were way older than me. So it was almost like being an only child, except like having brothers, but they don't have any use for you. You only see them walking out the door, and you're sitting and watching a lot of TV, and nobody knew yet the harm that did to the brain. And I think I've been battling that all my life. Loneliness, not using the television to numb out being present. And I've wasted a lot of time. And a mind that could cause trauma by projecting into the future. These are traumas with a small t. In other words, you could be just sitting in your house and going like, well, wow, what's this era pandemic, what we're all going through and what I'm going through, and am I going to have a job, and will all that stuff. You're sitting in this moment and you're becoming traumatized by thinking about the future. I think this is very common, and people drown it out today with social media, and I would drown it out by television. All my unanswered questions. I was a pianist. I was a working pianist at a very young age, but I never wanted to practice because I never wanted to get off the couch. And when I thought about getting off the couch, I had a different voice talking to me saying, get off this couch. Go practice before Dad wakes up. He would work at night, so he'd wake up in the daytime because he's going to go, did Kenny practice? At least that's the way I heard it. And I had ADHD and I had very bad Tourette's. So bad, but they didn't have the word yet, but I would start making noises or body movements, and they would send me home. They wouldn't know what to do. And between that and being unable to pay attention and unable to do homework, I had the daily trauma of going to school unprepared for 12 years. So I woke up in fear every day. My parents were from an old generation where neither of them finished high school. And I thought when they heard me play piano, this is a different kind of trauma. When they heard me play piano, everybody thought, well, he'll be okay. We'll see him in Carnegie Hall or whatever. Doesn't matter that he didn't do his homework. It doesn't matter that you can't read his writing or left-handed, It doesn't matter all the other things that I had not learned to be and felt lesser than everyone else. But I looked like more than everyone else because if I played the piano, it was like holding a shiny object in front of everybody. And they were just blown away. And nobody even thought, well, does he get enough exercise, or does he do his homework, or, can he survive in Spanish class or whatever? So I basically grew up in a small T trauma, and I've spent the rest of my life trying to undo it. Now, against that backdrop, music came to me in the ultimate level of health, meaning I would just play it. I wouldn't worry about it. I would think I can do it. I would not think of myself as inadequate. All my superior feelings were if I just touched a piano. So it is all about neural passageways, really.
Mm-hmm.
In one neural passageway, two people can touch a piano. One can feel like they're dipping their hands in warm water after making snowballs outside, right? And the other one can feel like they're touching a hot stove. And that's trauma. There's a lot of induced trauma for musicians to whether they're going to play well or not. And other ones, it's not the crowning issue in their life. Then later in life, I had the big T traumas. My daughter died in a car accident. She'd only been driving, maybe 6 months, and we were only letting her drive locally, but that happened. And, it's funny when you spend most of your life worrying about things that never happen, but instead of living your life, you worry about things that never happen. That's what I call very common small T trauma stuff. Then when something really does happen, you almost feel vindicated.
Mm-hmm.
Like actually there is something seriously wrong and you should feel that way now. And that thought made me strangely calm because I was used to getting traumatic inside, not being a pain to everybody else, but probably somewhat of a pain to everyone else, but nothing like what was going on inside. And suddenly the reality matched the feeling. So that just got me to go to work in music. I wanted to be able to express it. And I think I got more dedicated for composing something, which is what I had won a Guggenheim for, a thing called No Beginning, No End. And I immersed myself in it. And I was, when I wasn't in mourning, I'd be really involved in music, focused like I had never been focused before, or since. The trauma that is described in the book, because I didn't talk about that in the book, is I was finishing the book. I started the book in November. The book is called Becoming the Instrument. And I felt like I have a whole method of getting your mind out of the way and connecting your body to the instrument. And now it had evolved into, I am the instrument. I'm the instrument that plays the instrument. That's how healthy and wise my relationship with music is. But I can tell you that knowledge that you may possess in one area of life will not necessarily work in other areas where you have trauma. So in other words, I couldn't make decisions in my life like I made decisions in music because there was so much more to be holding on to be afraid of. Whereas in music, I was really one of the few people that knew that there's nothing to be afraid of. It's only music. So, but this trauma, as I was just to finish the answer to your question, I had started the book in November of 2015. And in January of 2016, I was almost done with it because I had really gathered a lot of new material and it was almost writing itself. I had all the chapters, everything. But then I went to India. I have a teacher, a guru, and I don't normally talk about, publicly because it doesn't really matter. There's a lot of wisdom out there. And so I went to the ashram in India. And for 3 weeks, I really wanted to crack the wall between my knowledge of liberation in music and my knowledge, but no experience of liberation in my life. I said, I'm going there and I'm going to throw myself in the pool and see if I can find the same easy freedom that I have if I touch a piano. And it took a while of freaking out, because suddenly I don't have all my security blankets around and I'm just another devotee walking around this ashram in India. But after 6 or 7 days, I found that the ego dropped its defenses somehow. I was listening to these Brahmin priests chant for a certain celebration that day. I found that I went out, like to the space I go to when I play. And when they were done, I had been sitting there an hour. And instead of counting every minute of the hour I was sitting there, an hour had flown by. And when I got up, I was almost banging into walls. I was just so intoxicated. I said, this is what I was looking for. I get this when I play. So I came home ready to actually top off the book with, the sub subject of the book is the integration of my knowledge in music to using it in my life, to being able to treat my life the way I treat the instrument. And I thought I had just gotten the final chapter. Wow, now I am the instrument. I'm not just trying, in life, I'm not just trying to make things go well. Whatever happens, a tree lives through everything. I live through everything. But a week later, I had a car accident. I wasn't minding the time difference, and I was coming back from New York too late, and I just fell asleep. And it was a bad accident, but I walked away. I felt very protected. I was just bleeding in my head, but I felt very protected. But a week later, I started waking up with anxiety every day that I have never experienced. I mean, I think I've experienced it here and there, but not like on a daily basis. And I was told that sometimes certain accidents, a trauma can emerge from the accident, even if you don't feel like that they're connected. And then I went through that for about 6, 7, 8 months where I couldn't get out of bed to even brush my teeth. And I tell this story at the end of the book because that's why the book didn't come out. Well, that's part of the reason the book didn't come out until January 2022. For the rest of that year, I couldn't write because I was trying to get out of bed and do any of the work that I was already contracted to do. Then I was 17, 2018, it lifted as they told me it would. But I did a lot of breathing exercises, a lot of meditation. I started to embrace these practices of my teacher like I had never embraced. Pain is a great motivator, as we all know. And when I was in that kind of pain, I sat down in front of what you call a puja, which is where your artifacts are that you just meditate in front of. And I would sit there for a long time till that trauma would die away and the breathing would replace it. So breathing became, as I knew it was supposed to be, but I was never so motivated to practice. Breathing became the central activity in my life. 2019, I started to get back into writing the book because it was nearly finished before I left in 2017. But I had some new information and a couple of new chapters. Finally, in 2020, where I was really burning, because when I emerged from that trauma, I emerged with a deeper relationship to breathing, where breathing was my purpose on earth, not getting the results I want. Doesn't matter what else is happening. If I'm tuning into my breath, I'm in this moment. And if I'm really tuning into my breath, I'm not thinking about anything. And this is the almost religion, I believe, of the 21st century. I don't care what religion or spiritual path you follow. One of the most blessed states is to be in this moment, not in the past or the future, regretting the past or fearing the future, and not thinking. Any way that you've learned to not think in this day and age is probably the closest thing to linking up with the direct spiritual source of your choosing. So finally, when the pandemic came, the first 2 weeks, I just finished the book, which meant just reading it over and over again and going through misprints, which there still were anyway, but and that's that. And the final thing was how I talked about doing what I do at the piano. Many people could be just as traumatized because they have a concert. What they call performance anxiety is trauma. And it's triggered by the idea that you have to perform for someone. For me, that was like, oh, thank goodness I have to. That was all my life. Oh, thank goodness I have to perform now. I don't have to live. Because I feared living life, but I didn't fear playing the piano, So finally, after all that, I felt my life had moved more into alignment with the way I regard music. You can't choose it. It's not a philosophy. It's a trigger. It's a neural pathway. No matter how much you think you should be liberated when you play the piano, if you have a neural pathway that fears playing the piano, that's where you're going to go. So it's going to betray your own beliefs, but those beliefs have to be followed by some kind of a practice. If you don't have a practice converting a fear into a liberation, and there are ways to practice it. And I've been doing it for musicians for years. And now I believe it relates to anybody. And you keep practicing it and you make that shift And of course, the mind flips right back into its old patterns. However, the more regular you are about making the shift, cutting a new path, the more you may tap into it at important times. Like when you would normally have fear, you might go, but if I just watch my breathing for a moment, I could connect with this moment. So the ultimate end of the book with that trauma, I think it was all very divine, whatever you call that, divinely inspired, that it happened that way instead of just finishing it up in 2017 and putting it out.
That is quite a story. Wow. I don't even know where to go after all that.
We started with trauma, which is not usually where we go for the book, but wherever you'd like to go.
No worries. No worries.
This is improvisation, so I have no problem with this.
Totally improvisation, yes. Let's start with the little T traumas. And, I think so many of us have to deal with those growing up that we don't really realize that that's what they are. I had some similarities to your upbringing. I didn't get to watch a lot of TV, but I did have older brother and sister that weren't really in my life. I'm left-handed, so I totally get that.
There's something
you can't read my writing.
Right. Yeah.
But there's just so much of those little things that our parents did back in the day that, if we looked at it today, people would flip. And it's just kind of, that's how it was. They didn't know any better. Right. Back when you were younger, they didn't have a name for ADHD. Like you said, they didn't have a name for Tourette's syndrome. And so, you go to school or you go wherever and your tics are acting up and people just, you're right. They don't know what to do with you. I think even in today's situations, with some things, even though we know more about things like Tourette's, it's still a matter of, I don't know how to handle this. How do I deal with you? But those little T traumas stick with us throughout our life, and they pop up in ways that you would never even begin to imagine. So, just, I think a lot of the fact that you are aware of it and you can actualize it and you can relate to it when these do pop up for you. That's a huge step in healing from traumas, because so many of us can't do that.
Well, I do think that there are therapies today that acknowledge and understand the brain much more than traditional therapy, where you just told your story and how does that feel and how's that, and right. One of them that I relied on is after that accident was EMDR, which I'm sure you're well aware of, may have even discussed here. And what was so good about that, it was getting into stories that you didn't think you affected you at all. Say, try to find when you, wet your pants in third grade. Yeah. Okay. So, or when I accidentally got my mother's hands caught in an electric window in a car, and how, I can still remember the feeling because I didn't know how to bring it down, and her crying, so they would guide you to this stuff that's hiding and shaping your life or limiting your life. And then they would do the bilateral balancing. And I don't think it's the last therapy that they're going to come up with. I think it's the beginning of understanding that the mind has different lights. It has different things that light up, responding to certain triggers or stimulus. And that now, the more you understand that, the more you can engineer new pathways. And there's a lot of promising stuff out there. I kind of wish it, because I always knew what my problem was. I just had no idea. And it was in life. But the counterpoint in my life was that I had no problems at playing music. in front of any amount of people. It would just juice me. And if you talk to most amateur musicians, and I would tell you that more than 50% of professional musicians will tell you of the feeling of limitation and responsibility when they think about performing. In fact, that's what gave rise to music therapy. I don't mean as a modality. I mean, that's how many people became music therapists. Very rarely in the beginning did anyone choose to be a music therapist. They chose to be a performer and found that it brought out their worst fears every time they did it. And then they tried music therapy, and just shifting the meaning in their mind. I'm not performing, I'm helping this person. And then they didn't have the anxiety. And then it's the effortless mastery, which is what I teach. And I've got at Berklee College of Music, the Effortless Mastery Institute, is sort of a healing, musician heal thyself. In other words, I would tell them, well, you didn't have to quit performing to get that feeling you got from music therapy. If you're playing on the stage of Carnegie Hall, just do music therapy. And they go like, what? Like how it just didn't compute. In other words, you get on stage, you turn yourself on, knowing that your light is going to raise the light in the room. And because you're there to help is very different than, I wonder if they'll like my playing. But that's the same thing as I wonder if they'll like me. So I had a reverse thing. A lot of people had a much healthier, or at least healthier life. They may have been self-judgmental in their life, but way more when they played music. For me, the freedom from all those mental constraints was simply to play the piano, and not even alone, to make sure someone was listening to me. It was built into me. That was the good thing about watching television. Every pianist I saw by the time I was 7 years old was an entertainer. If you think about who was, and we are not the same generation. So your parents said you didn't watch a lot of television, but coming out of World War II, early 50s, they thought that was a solution. Wow, I don't have to have a babysitter. If he sits in front of the TV and he doesn't make a sound for 2 hours, they thought that was like canned peaches. They thought that was a solution. They didn't know that it was going to actually cripple people in terms of being present. The difference between being numb and being present. And people that have trauma are always seeking a solution where they're numb until they realize that they've also become numb to the possibilities of their life. So now the challenge is to get out of being numb and become present, which numb is the poor substitute for. Yeah, you're present when you're watching a TV show. You're watching a cop show, and it's a half hour in, and they're experiencing the worst part of the story. And 15 minutes before it ends, they start to see a thread of how they're going to catch the criminal, and it's all done in an hour. And a person that sees life roll out a problem and solve it within an hour over and over again has no patience for the pace of actual life.
That is so true. That is so true. We live in a world of instant gratification, and that's just not how life works nowadays or ever.
And that was the early 50s. Now we're talking about solving it within seconds.
Right. Absolutely.
Memes, and social media.
Yeah. I like how you kind of reframed the performance. Instead of performing, you're helping people. It's just a way of reframing your mind, reframing your thinking, changing your neural pathways. Right. So that it's not I'm going to go perform and entertain these people. It's I'm going to go play my music and, provide therapy and, healing for these people. Because music for sure is such a huge, I think is a healing modality. I know for me, I tend to get lost in various genres depending on what my moods are. I need to hear different kinds of music. So it's, for me, it's very much a mental therapy. Absolutely.
The oddity is that music has a far more correct effect, what it was meant to be, on the people listening than it does on the people who play. Because there are many people that pervert their invert and pervert their own humanity to try to get a good performance out. And those are not the performers we generally listen to. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'll show two versions in my class. And I've been very lucky. To be a teacher is to have even hammered these lessons home to me even deeper as I help others lift the veil from their own self-judgment and suddenly connect with the instrument. See, connecting with the instrument is not validated by whether or not you play well. Connecting with the instrument is validated by whether or not you forgive yourself instantaneously for anything that comes out, whether you can celebrate yourself, no matter how the music sounds. We should not hold ourselves hostage to the value system of I played good, I played bad, because that will rob us of the actual experience of music. Music is not, I'm talking about the player. Music is not a valid experience because you played well and everybody liked it. Music is a valid experience because you accepted yourself while you were playing it. And this is a tremendous healing for the musician and very much of a revelation, believe me, because we were raised in a Western society that totally gauged gouged is probably the better word. Your validity. Because here's the rest of the set. It gouged your validity, but I meant it gauged your validity by how good you played.
Yeah.
So therefore, here's the opposite experience. I played so well as a child, like a prodigy, that nobody even questioned if there was anything wrong with me, because it couldn't matter, because look how he plays the piano. Even though he goes home from school sometimes kicking and screaming because he can't control the sound he's making and it's making his throat raw, but then he's going to play piano. It's all okay. So it's the value system. And that's why I feel like the book is called Becoming the Instrument, Lessons on Self-Mastery from Music to Life. That's because in my life only, I'm only telling about how I learned it. I know so many healthy and wise things from what I was gifted with. I won't say that I even did the work. I was gifted with a relationship to music that others really needed to find, but I needed to find that in my life. And whereas I was started with this gift in music, it only came to me, the integration, I would say, is less than 10 years old. And that's spending decades, 6 decades in pain, while you have a pain-free experience of playing music. And finally, teaching so much and the good therapy, I started to say, okay, I need to be in this moment and accept whatever's going on. That's not a big revelation. It's just that most people can't do it. And my exercises for doing it at the instrument turn out to be effective for doing it away from the instrument. So when people, though I was teaching, which I have them keep journals, half of their experiences were not in the music. They were in their life. This whole thing changed for me. And now I'm at the precipice of thinking that what I call effortless mastery or becoming the instrument could be a way out for people that don't even play the music.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Alexander technique started as purely a music technique. It was how a violinist was solving his own problems with the way he was holding the violin. And now Alexander technique is a major instrument of achieving, mental or spiritual harmony, physical harmony.
Interesting. Well, Kenny, this has been really fascinating. Thank you so much for coming on and talking with us today. This is a little bit different of ways of thinking than we normally discuss on the show. So this has been really, really interesting. Thank you.
Well, this is a very different interview for me. So I thank you, because from the point of view of your show, I've never discussed the book on this level. The book is very multifaceted. And you just pulled out a facet that hasn't emerged yet in an interview. So I thank you.
Absolutely. Listeners, you know the drill. I will have all of Kenny's contact information, the link to his book, everything down in the show notes. Just head over to releasingtraumapodcast.com, pull up his episode, and it will all be there for you. As always, thank you so much for listening. If you're listening from one of your favorite apps, whatever it is, make sure you give us a like, give us a follow. And we will talk to you in the next show. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure you hit subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss a show. Be sure to check us out on our new socials on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.